Hi, welcome back to Vulnerability Let's Talk. My name is Dr. Ayisha Zakia Jefferson, and I am a professor, a spiritual life coach, and a Black and Brown beauty activist. Today, we are going to be talking about abortion. And I want to make it clear on this topic that we are not talking in terms of rights or being pro-life or pro-choice. As always, I have three amazing guests. Tameka Renee. I also have Andrea Tardy-Robindon, and then I have Tonise Gsrdner. All of these women are life coaches and entrepreneurs in their own rights, and they have their own platforms of which they will share with you. But these women, I really have to commend on being brave enough to come on here and talk about this topic, because it is a very, very sensitive issue for many, which is the reason why I felt like it had to be addressed in the first place. And so I'm going to call these women on, and I'll talk a little bit more about why I thought the topic was good. For now, why I felt like God was kind of pushing me to talk about this. I feel like it was God and my ancestors combined, which is probably usually the case. So let me invite these beautiful and amazing women on, and then I'll go into a little bit more why this issue was important to me, and hopefully that'll unfold as the conversation pursues. So I do see that Andrea is on, so I'm going to go in and invite you guys. Andrea, just invited you, and Tameka, I just invited you. I'm definitely going to be looking at my notes because I want to make sure that I get the right statistic. Oh, we looking gorgeous.
Hi, my
look at my queens. Yes, I cannot wait to see Andrea. Andrea, did you see it yet? Did you see the invite? Hold on, let me see.
Okay.
I'm going to invite you again, Andrea. I just did it again. Hopefully it comes up for her. Andrea, I sent the invite again.
You know, it could be a little confusing at first trying to get on.
I know, it's okay. It says she's unable to join. Oh no.
Tell her to
on
send.
my end, it said that you weren't able to join. I'm gonna send it out. I sent the invite twice. My apologies. Try it again.
Tell her if she see request to join, she probably.
Have you seen request to join? Yay!
Yes.
Yay!
Anytime,
Hey guys.
this is my belief sometimes. Anytime they're like
out. You went out. Ayisha.
Yep, you've gone out.
Yeah,
You're back
anytime
now.
I see that there's challenges, I know it's supposed to happen. And so I was just mentioning how I know that this is a sensitive topic for many, and how I am super grateful that you all were brave enough to come on here and have this conversation, because trust me, I have reached out and talked to so many men and women, because I did think it was important to have men part of this conversation, but I could not find a man bold enough to come on. And so I don't speak any less of it. I know the issue is sensitive in many facets. So for whatever their reasons, that's okay. But hopefully in the future, we can get some men to come out and see what their perspectives are in their experience with this. Even though they didn't physically experience, they may have experienced it with a partner. But I wanted to say that I had mentioned before that this is not a pro-life or pro-choice conversation. This is a conversation that is really just focused on us sharing our story, because often when it comes to this topic, it seems so taboo. There's a whole lot of silence surrounding it. And when I was looking up the statistics, so I keep looking to the side because I was like, let me look up some statistics on this thing. And it says 1 in 3 women have had an abortion. And in the statistics, which that was more than I thought, it said women who were over 35 were most likely to have an abortion. Women who had children already were most likely to have had an abortion. And it said that it didn't matter. The statistics didn't wiggle if the person was single or partnered either. So I just thought that I found the statistics very fascinating. And it said it didn't matter if this person was religious or not either. So it was literally even when it came to religion. So even people who, and again, this is not a political thing, so let me just make this clear. Even people who have said they are pro-life are also in these statistics. Okay? So that's even in there. So I basically wanted to say that because I wanted to say that if you don't think you know anybody, you most likely do know someone who has experienced this. And I've really been on this foundation of silence lately, and how the silence is a kill. It can be a healer, but it can also be a killer too. And so us speaking our truth and sharing can really heal and cure generations. And again, I know that's going to unfold in the conversation, but I think if we look at this as like a social issue, reproductive health issue, mental, spiritual, and physical health issue, I think it could kind of like change the lens on stigmatizing how we feel about our experiences with abortion too. All right, so I am going to go around and have you guys introduce yourselves. Even though I said your names already, I do think it's important for you to introduce yourself. So I'm going to go in order of the flyer. Tameka, you're first.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tameka Renee. I'm originally from the Bronx, New York, but I live in the outskirts of Charlotte. I've been here for this year will make 28 years, and I am a minister. I am a counselor. I'm a spiritual coach, a mother, a wife, all of those things. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tameka. And next we have you, Miss Tonise.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tonise Gsrdner. Like Ayisha has mentioned, I am an author, motivational speaker, empowerment coach, healer, given the day holistic healer, as well as a stylist. I'm also a mother, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know what else I do right now, but we may get into that.
All right, beautiful. Okay, so Vanessa wrote, there's a lot of women with money who get abortions and have them labeled as miscarriage. Hey, whatever it is. And let me just also say this too. There's many reasons that people have abortions. And I think that there has often been, I think this is what I feel, a strategically created lens that it's only about people who have sex and just have unwanted pregnancies. You know, that could be one. But there are health issues that cause people. I know I've seen this in my family. There are abuse issues that can also cause it as well. There are protective issues that cause people to have it. There are shame issues that cause people to have it. And shame can be under many umbrellas, and that's why one of the reasons why I brought up religion, because so many will use that as a reason not to or whatever. Again, this is not that conversation, but I just wanted to notate that people have abortions for so many
Yep.
different reasons.
Yeah.
So it's not an isolated, siloed. There's not just one reason. So, anyways, all right, Andrea.
Hey guys, I'm Andrea Robinson. I live in Maryland. I'm from a small town called Hurt, Virginia, but moved to Maryland some years ago. I'm also, as Dr. Ayisha mentioned, a life coach, a mentor, a spiritualist, a healer. And so I'm just grateful to be here and connect with you all today.
Yes. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, each one of you. And then at the end, of course, we'll talk more about how we can find you amazing ladies. So my first question, and I literally just I didn't really do any research when it came to these questions. Most of the time I just kind of go from my gut. But for whatever reason, I felt like I just wanted to ask what your age was when you had, and I know, you know, it might not just be one.
The connection.
But if you feel comfortable.
Ayisha.
Connection is off. Can you hear me? Am I clear?
You're clear now, but it was weird, that whole last sentence that you did nothing.
All right. So I was saying that the first question is, I wanted to ask you guys what age you were. And the reason why I'm asking this specifically about age too is because I kind of want in this conversation, like the story to unfold and for us to kind of go on a journey with kind of where we were then versus where we are now with it. If anything has changed. So that's the only reason that conversation is even coming up, about what was your age when you had an abortion. So anybody can start. And if you choose not to answer, that's okay too.
I was 16.
Okay.
Okay. Tameka?
I was 18.
Okay. I've had 2 abortions, one at 19 and the other one at 21.
Okay, 19 and 21. And I was 18 in my first year of college when I had my abortion. So the next question is, just like I said, allowing the story to unfold. If you feel comfortable answering this question, why did you decide to have an abortion, or did you even make that decision? Because again, from the different stories that I had, everyone didn't make their own choice in this. I've had situations where a partner chose, or I've heard conversations where a parent chose. So if this was a decision, let me I'll keep the question. If you feel comfortable with it, why did you choose to have an abortion?
Well, I'll go first since I answered the age first. For me, it was I was a minor, of course. I was 16. So it was something that sex wasn't something that we ever talked about, coming from a small town and with the religious background and from a Black family. I mean, in the 80s, it's just something we didn't talk about. We were told to go to school, be good girls, and, get a great education and keep it moving. So when things happen, we just really didn't discuss it. We just acted. So, I can remember this was 16, but from what I can remember, I'd never had a say-so.
Well, you're breaking up a little bit, Andrea.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I want to make sure I'm catching everything you're saying. Yeah.
Okay, so I never really had a say-so, and I don't think it was really a choice because I didn't even really understand what was going on myself. And again, we never talked about it. And actually, it caused some issues for me down the road because the way I handled it. But when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know who the father was. And I had just began to be sexually active at that age. Again, I'm from a small town. So I knew it was between probably 2 people. And I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I ran away from home, which led to other situations because I left a letter. And the letter indicated probably that I was going to harm myself because, again, I had it in my mind that I'm supposed to do this and do that and do this. And I felt like I was a failure, right? Because I got pregnant at 16 in a small town where everybody knows your business. And so I say that to say I was a minor anyway. So really, again, and we didn't talk about it. So we just did, like, try to sweep it under the rug. But at that time, everybody already knows. And so I'm sure you have other questions, and you go on and on and on. But other things transpired after a while, that once I started my spiritual journey and getting a life coach and a mentor, a lot of my trauma was uncovered, which was the beginning of my abortion that even started it when I was 16, that I never knew affected me throughout my life until I became an adult and went through life myself and uncovering why I am the way I am. But like you said, Ayisha, mental health is real. And we are all products of our environment. And so, I just started learning more things about myself when I started doing the work. But it was traumatic for me. And I didn't realize it until my adult life, how traumatic it was. Not the actual experience. Well, the experience was a little, but the healing that comes from it. Because I never received healing from it. I just kept moving because it was all I was used to.
And I think what you said was good too. I think that you had a couple of nuggets in there. The fact that conversations are not had before this, I think is I think it causes a lot of trauma and pain within itself. Oh gosh, I was going to say something else that you said. The conversation too. Another thing that you said, when I was talking to different people about it, many people had not thought about it or discussed it since it happened. It was like, I did it and that's it. Oh my gosh, I haven't thought about that. What made you ask me this? What made you? And it was like they thought I was singling them out for a particular reason. But I wasn't trying to single them out in any way. Like I said, the reason why I wanted to have the conversation is because it's just not discussed, and it wasn't even until I had to have my abortion that it was even brought up. Other people said, oh my gosh, I had one too. I can help you. I can tell you where to go. And it was like, gosh, why didn't I know this before this? And so that's going to unfold in just a minute. But yes, thank you for sharing that. Tonise?
The first one, like I said, I was 19. And, similar to what Andrea said, even growing up in a household was very Christian. It was all about, church and whatever. But I was, kind of coming into my own at that age. I was working at a salon and doing my thing. And I got caught up, just hanging out, being a little promiscuous, and got caught up with a guy and found out I was pregnant. And I was like, oh, crap, I didn't tell my mom. And once again, the same thing. I shared it with a friend. Oh, wow, I've had this. I can tell you where to go. Da, 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 da. What are you going to do? So it's a lot of different things, like Andrea said, that comes up in your mind. Because, I'm 52 now, so this was a lot of years ago. 19, I'm like, gosh, I'm just trying to start my career. I don't know how to maneuver with all of this. I don't even really, this guy wasn't my boyfriend. Like, we wasn't in a relationship. It was just weird. I didn't even tell him until after. I didn't even let him know that I was even pregnant. And the craziest thing, you guys, after I went through that experience and I shared it with him, he was very, very upset. But I didn't even know that this man was actually literally planning on marrying somebody else. He was planning a wedding. And I shared this little piece with this story because this is really weird. He was planning a wedding and I guess dealing with somebody else. That husband found out, killed his person that he was messing with, and killed the guy that I was pregnant from right after I had the abortion. So that whole thing was like, we can get into a lot of spiritual stuff on that one, but craziest thing abortion, and then boom, now he's deceased.
Mm.
It was weird. The second time at 21, or was I 22? I can't quite remember. I was out on my own, of course, and I had a live-in boyfriend. We were in a relationship, and we had already had a daughter, and we agreed that, hey, we can't, maintain or take care of another child or whatever. And so we both came to the decision to, for me to go ahead and have the abortion. Now, when I did it, he was very upset, and I was like, we talked about this,
Mm.
But I was like,
You're breaking up, Tonise.
what part did you got? What did you all miss?
No,
Can you
I
hear me?
got the last part. You got the fuzzy screen
Okay.
too.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
you're a little fuzzy too. I don't know what's going on. Okay, Spirit, let's get this.
I know.
Yeah.
The conversations are supposed to happen. Hey, they hear our voices. It's okay.
Yes, and Ayisha, I want to commend you for even bringing this out, because it is a thing that is very, very solid. Like you said, women don't talk about it, but like you said, 1, 2, 3 had an abortion. 1, 2, 3 had an abortion. Some of them had multiples, and it's just not talked about because people are still feeling shame and guilt about it. People haven't forgiven themselves. But yeah, it was a lot. And at 22, I was really feeling myself. I had my own business. I was, I didn't have time for no kids. He didn't have time for any kids. And we came to that decision that, we was going to abort, but he actually regretted it later. That was a whole big to-do in our relationship.
Yeah.
So the second time that I had an abortion, and I just didn't feel like it was good for me to raise children at that time.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for sharing even this role.
Yeah,
the first one and the second one, because again, we often remove men from this process on, what it is that they feel and how they digest, having this happen. But I think they're an important part of the equation too in the discussion. So yes, I appreciate you sharing all of that, and the fact that you had to thank you. Tameka.
Okay, so I have had several, okay, and I have 5 children. So the first one, and I don't remember my age. The first one at 18. The other ones I don't remember my age. And if I'm gonna sit here and help women, then I've got to be transparent. Okay, so the first one, I was a freshman in college, and I did not know it then, but I was dating a guy who was what we call a super senior. He lied to me about his age, found out later on, years later, that he stayed in school and lived on campus so that he could prey on the freshman girls. Okay, I have 2 of his children. And when I found out I was pregnant, I grew up in a very abusive home. I was deathly afraid of my mother. And I shared on a previous podcast that when she found out that I had sex, her reaction was very abusive and horrific. So I left to go to college, not because I wanted to go to college. I left to go to college to get out of her house, because born and raised in New York, I could not live on my own with a high school diploma and find a good job. And I knew at school that I would have a place to lay my head and 3 square meals a day. So when I found out that I was pregnant, and again, I'm not knowing his age, but he's a lot older than me. So he didn't even have the money to help me get an abortion. He had to borrow it. And when I went and had it done, I was devastated. And I had to go to therapy. One of the good things about it was before you have an abortion, there's a counselor there to make sure that your mind is right. At least that's been my experience.
Yes.
And she was excellent. I remember it. This woman she was a Caucasian woman, and I just didn't have the mental capacity to take care of a child. And he, of course, at that time, I didn't know, but he was sleeping with all these different women. I mean, girls on campus. I can't even call us women because we were so young, fresh out of high school. And he was, if you had a twat, he was going to hit it if you let him. Okay. So I didn't know it then, but he definitely didn't want more children. And I knew that he had a child. And at that time, she was about 4 years old. But I later found out that he had multiple children that he was not claiming. So he didn't want me to have a child. So it took years. And when I say years, and I'll share more later, but my healing process came when I was at one of Jonathan's retreats, the second retreat that we had, and it came out of nowhere. So, and then yesterday you and I were discussing a lot of different things. So processing it all, it tore me up mentally. It devastated me for a long time until after the retreat and God started walking me through the true healing process. Because at that time, by the time I had gotten to the retreat, it was out of sight, out of mind. And the fear of not being able to talk to my mom, because now I'm not afraid of her. But back then, I thought that when she said she was going to kill me, I took it literal. That's how afraid I was of her. So I knew there was no way. I couldn't talk to nobody. I didn't tell any of my friends that I was pregnant. Me and him just went to the clinic. We had it done. And he brought me back to my dorm room. And I slept for a couple of days, didn't go to class. And that was that. Another time that I had one, I was dating this guy. And being unchastened, being not taught about learning who I am. I dated this guy because he was cute and because he was buff. And at this time, I had 2 children and I lived on my own and I was 3 hours away from my hometown. I left school. I left school because I found I was pregnant with my first child. I didn't go to school because, again, I didn't want to go to school. It wasn't that learning came easy to me. I just didn't like school. Okay. So I used my first child to get out of school. That was my scapegoat. So I'm dating this guy and he has his own car and he's buff and he's very handsome. And I used to do hair. So I'm braiding hair and this one girl asked me, "Who are you dating?" And I told her. And she said, "I used to date him." And she said, "He just got out of prison for assault." And there's levels to assault. So it's certain regular assault is not a felony, but he went to jail because he was so abusive that she said he had her by her ankles and was banging her up against a brick wall. And he was not for abortions. And when I found out that I was pregnant, and then he also told me he specialized in throwing knives. Okay. So I told my friend, I said, "I'm pregnant by him." I said, "I cannot have his baby because I learned that he had gone to prison and that this man is going to kill me because he's abusive." So she took me to the clinic and she helped me. And that was devastating as well because the act is traumatizing. It was traumatizing for me. But then knowing, okay, I don't have it together. I don't have the mental capacity to pull it together because I'm looking for love in all the wrong places and I'm mixing it in me. At that time, I didn't know it, but I'm processing it through the healing or for the years. I'm looking for love in all the wrong places, and this is the result of it. So I'll leave it there, and if I need to talk about the other ones, then I will later on.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that from a different lens. I appreciate that. So for me, I had an abortion at 18. I was in my first year of college, and I know I feel like I'm like using the same soundtrack constantly by repeating, but I was really in this. I think it's a good thing in one sense, but another thing, I feel like it imprisoned me and trapped me. I was really always focused on being this really, really good girl. And so I didn't want to be the one to ruffle any feathers. I didn't want to be the one to cause any disappointment. I wanted to be the one who, I don't necessarily think that I wanted anybody to focus on me. I didn't want anybody to have to focus on me. You see what I'm saying? I wanted to be the one that was kind of like out of the way, like Isha's good. But so I said all that to say, I did have a boyfriend in my freshman year of college. We were in love, and so interesting too, because I can literally remember, I know exactly when it happened. Like I can literally pinpoint exactly when I got pregnant because we were that safe. I had such a fear of getting pregnant that I was jumping, you know, every time. I know when it happened because it was just a time that we didn't have, and I was like, you know what, let's just go. There's no way I can just get pregnant this time. Well, we got pregnant, and I can remember spotting. I was very regular. So I'm just spotting at the time, and I'm like, as soon as the flow wasn't regular, as far as my cycle, I knew it. I mean, as soon as it happened, I knew it. And so I went to a friend's house. I purchased a pregnancy test, went over to my friend's house. Her mother was there, told her, kind of slipped it out like, I need to take this test. And at that time, the friend confessed to me that she had already had one. I didn't even know. She told me she had one. And so I took the test still, I think, kind of naive about the test, even though I knew the spotting thing had happened. And then it wasn't even the 5-minute wait, whatever you're supposed to wait. That thing went pink quick.
Quick.
I mean, that thing just whoop. And there was no, like, I think I tripped. Like, I looked at it like, this is really, and it seemed like the moment that I found out, my friend knocked on the door just to check on me. And when I opened the door and we looked at each other, we just both bursted out crying because she knew based off of my face that I was like, oh my gosh. And so I also remember being very sleepy. So I'm taking classes at the time. I'm just tired. Every time I get a chance, I got to go lay down. I don't care if it's 20, 30 minutes. I need to go lay down between classes. And so I did talk to maybe like 3 people about it. One of my best friends, she's actually on here. She was in the military at the time. She begged me to keep the baby. She said, we can do this together. I don't care if he ain't in the picture. We can do this together, girl. I'm gonna help you. And I don't care how many pros that I could come up with. All I could think about was shame. And I knew myself. I know myself. I know whatever I put my mind to, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do it well. At least to the best of my ability. I couldn't get around shame. I don't care what, I mean, and me and him sat down, he did have one child at the time. We sat together, did a pros and cons list. I purposely came up with cons. And so I had to go, I don't know why, but I felt like I had to go tell my mom. And the disappointment in her face. I was one of those kind of kids. I wasn't the kid that needed to get a spanking, even though I did get spankings. All you had to do was give me the look. And my mom had that just hurts me now to think about it.
Yeah. My mom still gives that.
My mom had such a look of like hurt and disappointment. And that was the look that I had been running from my whole life. That just hurts me. I did not want to be, remember I told you, I just did not want to be the one to ruffle any feathers. So that look, and she didn't make a decision for me. She just said, what do you want to do? But her look made me make the decision.
Yeah.
That was enough for me. to go ahead and make the decision based off of the look. And as soon as I told her, yep, I want to go ahead and have an abortion. And she made the appointment. She made the appointment for me because she had experienced it. And I did call my mom before this to make sure that I could tell her story. And she said she was fine. But she had one. And so because she was trying to protect her baby in another way, let's go ahead and get this over with. Let's just go ahead and push through this, get it over with. She made the abortion, but she made the appointment, but she said, I'm not going to go there with you. You and him are going to go because y'all make this decision. You guys are going to do this together. And she did. She addressed him as well. She said, you're going to take her. She didn't banish him. She didn't get on him. She just said, y'all made an adult move. So y'all got to make adult decisions together. And so yeah, that's my story. And I let me just tell you this, 2 parts. I had shame. This was midterms for me at college. So I had to tell my professors what my midterms on those days that I had to have a medical procedure and I had to show them documentation. I was so afraid because it wasn't just a doctor's note. It was the form that said dilation. You know what I'm saying? Like it said what happened. And I could just remember and I didn't see any judgment on their face. It just said, okay. But one of the professors, she must have noticed my face, but all she did was grab me and hug me. And that was deep. I hadn't cried the whole entire time. But when she just grabbed me and hugged me, I literally laid my head on her chest and just wept.
Yeah.
Literally, that was the only time that I remember just getting it out. I just wept. And she also said, I experienced very similar to you at the same age. She said it wasn't identical. She didn't even go into it. She just hugged me. So, yeah, the stories.
Yeah.
The stories. So I guess I kind of went into how I felt, but after the procedure happened, do you remember what you felt? And the reason why I'm saying this too is because, again, I've talked to different people and different people felt a different way. I have talked to a few people who said they felt relief. I've talked to others who said they felt shame. I felt others who, like I said they hadn't even really thought about it since. It was just something that they just did. I've had others who grieved later. So it's been different. It's been different things. So do you remember how you felt then after the procedure happened? So we're talking about back then, not now. And anybody, again, you don't have to answer all the questions, just whatever you choose to share.
Well, I did. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So I felt ashamed. Again, I was 16, so I still had to go back to school. I still had to show my face. By that time, everybody knew my story, right? And so and I used to keep a lot of things to myself. I never really expressed it. Again, I didn't even talk about it. And if somebody brought it up, I would get emotional about it. But to piggyback off of what you said, Ayisha, you explained your story is very similar to mine with that look. That look that your mother gave you was the same exact look that I also received. So I carried the emotions of that with me, and I can still remember it to this day. And that's what I've held on to this day. And that look, and it's not like she turned her back on me. She supported me, but that's really what my dad stepped up. And that's what really made a difference for me, is because, and again, we still haven't talked about it to this day, really. We'll get there eventually because it's all a process, right?
Yes.
However, but I know it was a look of like, are you okay? And of disappointment, right? And I get it. So that is what I've been carrying with me these many years, and I didn't realize it. So that was what I felt then, and that I still felt after a while. But it was shame, and it was a disappointment. You know, I knew I was a disappointment. I felt it,
Mm.
but she never said it. She never said it. Never was negative. And she did ask, what did I want to do? So she was supportive as best as she could be,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my father too. So that's what I felt was disappointment and shame, you know,
Okay.
because I knew I had broke her heart.
Yeah.
Hmm.
For me, I was definitely ashamed because first of all, I wasn't in a relationship with this guy, and
Mm.
I did everything under the table. I didn't even tell my mother because I did not want the look. You know,
Mm.
grew up going to church every Sunday, Baptist Training Union, Sunday school. I went to Bible camp. You know, my mother was very, excuse my, hell bent on me understanding the word and knowing how Jesus was in my life. So that would have been like the ultimate shame for me to get pregnant. You know, even though she had me at 23, you know, I still was, you know, actually was getting ready to kind of move out of my mom's house, but I just did not want that look. I didn't want the talk. I didn't want the disappointment. So I was already ashamed before I even had it, you know, and I pondered around keeping the baby and all this stuff. But I was like, I don't know this guy. I don't, you know, what am I doing? You know, so I was just shamed from the whole process, from the act to going through the whole process, having the abortion. And I remember just trying to keep that under wraps and not letting anybody know but the friend who actually shared with me where to go, you know. And I just tried to kind of stuff it,
Hmm.
you know, as much as possible. And I too started dealing with it more when I started my spiritual journey, you know, because
Mm.
oh my God, this is karma, you know, how is this going to affect me later? You know,
Yeah.
am I going to be able to have children? And this was both times. The first time I felt shame, the second time I was more disappointed afterwards too, after the regret of my boyfriend at that time at 21. I was like, we agreed to this. Now you're making me feel bad. Now, you know, I've already done it now. I can't retract it. It's
Mm-hmm.
done. You know? So it was shame. Shame is the pertinent word here that you mentioned.
Mm.
A lot of shame.
Mm.
I beat myself
Mm.
up a lot about it. And yeah, I'll go on later, even when it came to Naila, because I pondered on even aborting her, you know.
Mm.
And that was a whole nother story, but we'll get into that part later because of course she's here.
Yeah.
But it was very embarrassing for me. I thought it would be embarrassing to my family, you know, because I was the mover and shaker in the family. I was the one that was trying to open up a business at a young age. I was the one, I didn't go to college or anything, so I wanted to make my mother proud. I was already hanging out in the street and getting high, doing all kind of stuff. So she was already a little disappointed in me anyway on how I was moving. So adding the pregnancy would have been like, oh no, now you're really doing it. So I kept it under wraps. My mother didn't find out about my abortions until my book, and
Mm.
that's when
Wow.
she read my first copy, and she was like, "You didn't say anything." No, I couldn't.
Mm.
But yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so y'all forgive me because we had neighbors moving across the street and they came to introduce themselves today. So, and then when the doorbell rings, the dog starts going crazy. But yeah, shame and guilt
Yeah.
was what I
Mm.
at the time. Um, the the guilt was that I took a life, and
Mm.
I'm not I'm not going to get into the topic, but I'm pro-choice, but I don't want to. But that was my guilt because at that time of what was being drilled in my head.
Hmm.
Mm.
So that was the guilt. And it was something I held in for years, like I said, until the retreat. And then the embarrassment was you're so insecure
Mm.
that you're with these knuckleheads that they just don't give two craps about you.
Mm.
And this is results of it, you know. And it was a lot of it. I've kept silent about it for years. You know, each time that I've had them, I had somebody go with me. You know, one of the times was by the same guy, and you know, as a freshman in college, but this time I think I was a sophomore, and I had to come from New York to the South because my mom was so abusive. She had found out, and she had put me out of the home, and I had nowhere to go. She was so abusive that I was sharing with you yesterday, Ayisha, that she would call family and be like, I put her out. Well, they weren't blood family, but they were family. I've known them all my life. I put her out, and if you let her stay with you, I'm going to make your life a living hell. And it wasn't that they were afraid of her. They just didn't want to put up with her bull. So I had nowhere to go. I went to be with him at his mom's house, and I had the clothes on my back, and that was it. So I had to, you know, wash my underwear every night. And I called my grandparents down here, and they sent for me. And my aunt helped me. And one of the things I'm very grateful for, they never, they never shamed me. My aunt, the whole family knew. And it was like, because we didn't discuss it, but it was like they understood, because they understood my mother. And I didn't even think about that till now. But my aunt said, I'll help you pay for it. And this is just how naive, how ignorant, and how stupid I was. I wanted the abortion so that I could get back to college to be with him. He was busy sleeping around with other people. But she did try to talk me into keeping it. And the peace that she gave me, and, you know, at that time, there was no shame or guilt other than me feeling like, okay, you did this to yet another child. You didn't give them the opportunity to come into the world. But when I got back to school, because my grandfather took me shopping, bought me clothes, and I was like, I was determined at that particular time that I was going to finish school so that I could make something of myself and make my mother out to be a liar. And when I got back to school, I hemorrhaged. So that was rough. And his sorry ass was nowhere. No, he was so busy hunting on somebody else. So I had to keep going. I had to keep processing, and I couldn't tell anybody because they knew how stupid I was. And then instead of them trying to I had friends that were trying to come to my rescue, but it wasn't done in love. Like, that's how they knew how to do it. They made fun of me, and they were like, you know, how could you be so dumb? And so I dare not tell them that I had an abortion. They just knew that I just wanted to be with him. And that's what they were. How could you be so stupid? You know, you're beautiful, you're all this, you're all that, and you want to chase after this guy. So, and then shortly after, I had 2 of his children. So, yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whew. Well, thank God for your beautiful family, too.
Yeah, they were amazing. Now, I never even thought about it. I was sent here to have an abortion, and I never even thought about the love that they gave me during that time.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what they did for me. There was no judgment. My 3 aunts, I don't think the guys knew, my uncles knew, or my cousins, but my aunts and my grandmother, and I think my grandfather knew. And he never shamed me. They never shamed me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. For me, I just remember immediately after it happening, I don't think shame was a direct feeling. I could just remember feeling lost.
Yeah.
Like, what did I just do?
Just lost.
Literally, I just felt like, I felt like and so for mine, I was put to sleep. So it was like I went in, was put to sleep, and then I just remember waking up in another room, and it was like, you know, kind of like, where am I? And I was up, you know, the nurse tended to me, I left, and I could just remember going back to the apartment. And it was like I saw things different. The apartment didn't look the same to me. I knew I wanted to take a bath. I don't know what that was. And I just remember going, and I think I couldn't. I wasn't supposed to take a bath. But I just really wanted to. And I remember him like, no, you can't. I literally turning the knob. Like, I just need to get in the bath. And he was like, no, you can't do that. He's like, do you want something to eat? So yes, just go get me some, you know, just, yeah, go, whatever. And this is so weird because it just shows me how we process things different. I was supposed to go lay down, but I could not go lay in the bed. I don't know what that was, but maybe the bed was a reminder. I don't know, but I could not go lay in the bed. And so I just remember him being like, what are you doing? Why are you not laying down? I said, I can't lay in the bed. And so the way his couch was, we both couldn't lay on the couch. So I remember him just saying, hold on for a second, and pushing two couches together so that we could lay side by side so that he could lay with me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what I wanted. I do remember laying down, thinking it was really nice that he made the effort to push these couches together where they were facing so it couldn't be like a full bed. Mm-hmm. But then I didn't want him to touch me either. I was kind of like, ugh. But I loved him. I just was feeling so many mixed feelings at that time.
It is a lot.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was just so many different emotions that I didn't know. I didn't know what to do with his love. I didn't know how I should be nurtured. I didn't know, you know, my friend, you know, told me she felt a sense of relief. I wasn't feeling relief. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't know what I was supposed to be feeling at that time. And he did. He left. He went and got something to eat. He came back. I couldn't even eat the food. And then, like 2 days later, I had to go back to school. Yeah, that was just it.
Then life.
That was it.
Back to work. Mm-hmm.
That was it. There was nothing. I just had all those emotions of feeling lost and feeling. I went to school. I just went right back to school, and I could just remember just going. I just remember seeing everything different. Like I just did this thing, you know. And looking at other people feeling alone, because my assumption was that other people, I was by myself. Yeah. That was the assumption at the time, not knowing, you know, what I know now, especially with, you know, me being a professor. And I do share with my students, you know, if they come to me about it, I'm like, look, this is the way it is. This is what happened to me. I tell the truth because I felt so alone. Yeah. But I just remember feeling just so lost is the only word that I can come up with. Mm-hmm. I felt lost and isolated. Yeah. What were you going to say, Tonise?
No, I was saying lost is definitely a word.
Yeah, I just felt so lost and isolated at that time. Yeah.
I didn't, when you're talking, I can remember I discussed it. I was disgusted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just felt, And I remember different people saying different things to me after. Girl, what you sad about? Girl, I felt better. I felt lighter. And it's almost like I envied them for feeling what they felt, because that's not what I felt. Yeah. And so again, like I said, it's not, I'm not saying anything pro-life, pro-choice. This was just simply my story, the way that it unfolded at that time. Exactly. So I think we've kind of already jumped into this next question. And some of us have already kind of talked about it. It was, you know, were you able to share with others? And did you feel like you had a sense of support during that time? So I think we all kind of touched on that. Does anybody want to add anything to that area? Because we all kind of said something.
No, I was by myself, and just like I said, I might have told my cousin after the fact. Probably was more involved at the second abortion, or most so than the first one, because the first one was very, very, very rough. You know, like I said, and I was literally almost going on 3 months, so that was a lot. You know, I didn't know how far along I was. You know what I'm saying? So I can remember being emotional, but I remember doing a lot of suppressing because I had moving on. I did all of this in silence. You know, I didn't think about it. You know, I couldn't talk to my mother because I felt like she would not understand. I couldn't talk to anybody else in my family. It wasn't like I had a whole bunch of friends, and then I wouldn't have wanted to share with the peers that I was hanging with anyway. You know, so I felt totally alone, and I just kind of dealt with it. And until I started doing, you know, inner child work and stuff like that, healing traumas and why I even got in the position in the first place kind of thing, is when I really started dealing with it. And this was probably after I had Naila. After I had her, when I started processing a lot of things.
Wow.
Yeah. And even though I had support, I still felt alone mentally, because at that time I had so many voids that I was trying to fill.
Exactly.
And you have to keep going. You know, I had to, when I had the one in college, or the two that I had in college, I had to keep going back to class. You know, I had to keep it pushing. And then when I had the one in between the children, you had to still be a mom. You know, and I was so empty and so lonely. And, you know, although I had the support there physically, they couldn't, you know, I don't know if my aunts had abortions or whatever, and that could have been one of the reasons why they were non-judgmental, or they never said anything to me or made me feel bad. Now, I'm going to be honest, I got one of those aunts that probably talk real trash about me. Oh, God, y'all help me, because y'all know I cuss, but I don't cuss on social media, so I'm holding back cuss words, Jesus. But I have one aunt that I'm sure she really talked trash, but, you know, I didn't care, you know, because I just wanted to get rid of it and get back to school. That was my goal. And for anybody that's thinking, well, what about birth control? It just didn't work for me. You know, I was, and I remember getting into an argument with a friend of mine when I was pregnant with one of my children, because she was like, "You're not taking your birth control." And I said, "That's not true." You know, so that I need to put that out there. But at the end of the day, it was just, you know, there was no mental support. And I carried it until the retreat. What was I? I think I was 48, 49 years. I carried that for 30 something years. Yeah, until the retreat.
Yeah. Well, I can agree with the rest of them. See, mine was kind of twofold. Remember, I ran away from home, right? And so, like, to the point they had to call people to search for me. They were looking in the woods. And so by that time, they had already found out that I was pregnant. And so I don't know if I'm mixing support up with love. I think at the time I did, because everybody was just glad I was okay, like that I was still alive, that I hadn't done anything. So that kind of drowned out any support that I may or may not have felt, because they happened at the same time. And so I just remember the women in my family, even my father, pouring into me and my sister love, because I was safe and okay, but I still felt ashamed. I felt like when I went back to school, I was judged. Oh, she's fast, because I still had a boyfriend in high school at the time too. But the baby, I still don't know who it was, who was by. And so, of course, that caused a lot of issues and different things. So I still felt alone, right? Because I was surrounded by love, because I was okay and safe, that I still didn't feel the support, because we didn't talk about it at all. Still, like you guys, I don't know if my aunts ever did. I don't know if anybody else ever did. We just kept moving, and like it was just another process. I used to always felt like I lived in a bubble, and so it was just another thing that we just dealt with, and we just kept it moving. And so, I got love, but it wasn't towards that. People were just like, "Are you okay? I'm here for you. God loves you. We love you." but nobody talked about that.
Yeah.
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 Because it's just something we didn't talk about. It just
Yeah.
wasn't. Sex was so taboo. Pregnancy before marriage was so taboo. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
like we just
definitely taboo.
had those discussions. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, I'm very open and transparent now with my children, even at a younger age. No, we don't talk about sex right now, but, you know, because even in sex education, back then, they didn't go into details, you know, like they didn't talk about any of that, this real life stuff and what can happen
Yeah.
mentally, physically, emotionally. They just didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
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 Yeah. It's so interesting too how this topic is such, it can be its own silent killer.
It is. It can.
I had I like I said, I talked to a lot of people who were not willing to come on this live, and for their own reasons, you know, trust me, I didn't battle, I didn't try to convince, but it was interesting that I got offered. I'd rather talk about this. I'll talk about this. I'll talk about this from multiple people. I'm saying at least 20 different people. But people were
Oh
saying
wow.
one of the things that I got, one of the things that I got was, you know, I'll talk about domestic violence. I'll talk about incest. I'll talk about, and I'm like, this, and this is the thing. I say, gosh, this, it was almost even a suggestion not to have the topic. And I said, this is exactly why it needs to be had.
Exactly.
Because so many people are challenged with this topic.
Yeah.
Like I said, over 20 people that I talked to, men and women, who could tell me about it all day long, how they were feeling, but they were like, I cannot put my face to this online. And so again, I pray for those who I've talked to and those who are listening, who haven't talked about it or thought about it or processed it in any kind of way, that this does bring about some type of healing, because I do feel like it being pushed down or laying I think people think it lays dormant, but so many more things are happening in the process.
Exactly.
So, and not choosing the
Yeah.
conversation that you're going to have. And I'm saying you don't have to, the conversation doesn't need to be had like in a group setting, but what are the conversations that you're having with yourself about this? Because it doesn't even have to, we're talking about abortion. I just seen the Limitless lady. We're talking about Mary. We're talking about abortion. But yes, the conversation doesn't have to be an open conversation with a group of people. But I just want to make sure that people are journaling or just doing something to have some type of healing nature, because this is not something that I feel like it just goes away.
Exactly.
So,
I wanted to share, Ayisha, I will say this, because I can attest to what you're saying, and I shared this with you the other day. When you told me that you were going to have this topic, I said to you, if you can't find anybody to fill your slots, I'm willing to talk. Now, behind the scenes, I said, God, please let her find somebody else.
Yeah.
And if you don't find anybody, if she doesn't find anybody else, then I'll know I'm supposed to share, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you sent the text message, I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
I was
yes,
like,
and I'm like I
yeah.
said, I'm making it perfectly clear. I can understand people I've talked to people in their 70s. I was trying to get a broad age span who was like, I'm not ready to talk about that yet. And so that was another reason why specifically I asked my mother. I was like, because of the responses that I got from so many, that's why I reached out to my mom and asked her, is it okay that I share with them that you also had an abortion? And even her response was, yes. and I didn't doubt my mom, but I am definitely like my mom, where she's willing to be transparent. She's a giver like that. But she also made sure to add, please let them know it wasn't an easy choice for me. And so I told them, to make sure that I would share that. But to answer, like, did I feel like I had support? Answer my own question. Did I feel like I had support? Just like you guys, what was already said, I felt alone, but I did have a mate, at the time. We were young, 18 and 20 years old. He already had a 1-year-old. So yes, I did feel like I had somebody who loved me. I did feel like, even though I didn't talk about it with them, I felt like I had unspoken aunties who I knew I could go to. Because my mom, she can't hold water. And my mom got a bunch of sisters. My mom cannot. She can't hold water. She can't walk and chew gum at the same time. Whatever is going on with me and my sister, the aunties know. Okay, so they are so cool. They're really loving. They didn't say anything to me, but it was kind of like when you walk in, it's kind of like like I know, I know what happened. Look type. Yeah. So I knew that I could go to the aunties if I was too ashamed to go to the aunties, but I knew that I could go to the aunties, too ashamed to go to my mom. At the time, I surely wasn't going to my dad about it. And like I said, I did go to him, but I will tell you something interesting. Even though we were in love, we had a very short time period at that point that we had been together. Even though we had like dated for, I don't know, almost a year, we had just made it like official within those 2 months. And I have to say that for him. But when I had an abortion, there was another girl who came forward and said she was pregnant by him.
It's always that little extra.
Right.
Y'all heard my extra.
So though I knew, and I didn't doubt, he didn't cheat on me. This was before me. But when I found that out, I no longer felt like I had a safe space. Because now he's going through a pregnancy with somebody else, and oh my gosh, I just had an abortion, and there's a possibility you got a baby on the way. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I love you so much, and now I may have to potentially decide if I'm gonna break up with you, or I may have to go through a pregnancy with you. And then she ended up having an abortion as well. But that is something else that I was processing during that time. So it was 18 years old. What a time. What a time at that age. Talk about coming of age, So we have I Am Eves by Yous, who said, yes, very much needed dialogue. All right. I didn't catch it at first. So I'm gonna skip one of the questions because we talked about that. And I think we've already even kind of talked about this. Has your thought process changed about your decision now, like how you view it?
For me, when you say your thought you mean if I regret it or if I...
Anything about it, how you feel, because we're talking about shame and guilt. Do you still, you know what I'm saying? How feelings evolved in different ways.
So my thought process has changed when it comes to, I wish I would have talked about it. And I wish I would have communicated it, like how I felt, and said in my family, why did we not talk about this? Because now in my adult age with children, I think about all kinds of things. I'm like, I want my children to be able to come to me and talk to me. And again, it's not like my parents did anything wrong to not allow me to speak. But when you don't talk about certain things, and when you are used to being in a certain character and come from a certain space, you just show up. And so that's the only thing for me. I do wish I would have gotten therapy, talk to a counselor, talk to my family. I just wish we would have talked about it then, right? But how could they have talked about it if they never experienced it?
Yeah.
You know, they didn't. This was the first time they would have went through with their oldest daughters, only me and my sister. So this was like a double whammy for them. Like me being pregnant, me running away. They're dealing with a whole new life situation, right? So now, you know, what I'm thinking about, I'm like, damn, I can't blame my mother for how she felt. I can't, because it's not her fault, right?
Yeah.
She's just growing up just like me, you know, and just like I experience with my own children now, different things, you know, and so that's the difference. I just wish I would have talked about it and we would have communicated it then, because that really would have put me down a different trajectory. A great life, don't get me wrong, but things would have been, I probably would have felt more whole. But what you don't know, you don't know. And what you don't speak up and say, and what they don't know, how can you? So that is the only difference now.
Yeah.
I don't regret it because it's part of my life. And I made the decision that I made, even though I was 16. For me, you know, then looking back, that was the choice, you know, it was a choice I made. I just got to live with it, right? So, but I just wish it would have been, I wish we would have talked more. And so that's something I'm trying to do now, is educate our youth of being more open, being transparent. It's okay. Talk about it before you make any life-changing decision, because it is a life-changing decision, especially for a female, because it's our body. We have to deal with it, right? And so it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. And I love that you said too, because I know I have gone through these ebbs and flows with, you know, I wish my parents would have did this, or I don't know, you know, sometimes making judgment on how I was raised at different facets in my life. But I truly know and believe that my parents did the best with what they had.
Basically.
I believe that with everything in me. And I also understand that that was their first and only time ever parenting. That was their first time. That was my mother's first time ever having an 18-year-old who was pregnant. You know what I'm saying? That was the first time that she had ever experienced that. And the only other example that she had probably had was her own parents from a whole other era who were much stricter than she was. You know what I'm saying? And so I do, you know, those times where judgment comes up, because sometimes it does. I had to think back to my mom being a human first.
Exactly.
That this was her first experience and her only experience parenting at that age, the only time that she had an 18-year-old who had experienced that. So her response was honest. Her response was very truthful. If she would have opened her arms and said, "Baby, let's do," that wouldn't have been her.
Exactly.
Her response was, "I'm in shock. I'm hurt." She showed me exactly what she felt at the time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, so thank you for sharing that too, because I think sometimes, you know, for some of us that know we have good people, good parents, sometimes we punish them for being human. You know, and that's just not fair. It's just it's just not fair. Anybody else want to share too about
Any regrets?
yes, well, not necessarily reject, just have has anything changed in your thought process about a change?
My thought process changed because I had to learn how to forgive myself for it. So that was my process of change, because like everything that probably went wrong in my life, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should. So I beat myself up for so long, and it was always a hidden thing. I never, talked about it. Like, I didn't have my mother. I had my mother, but I didn't talk to my mother about it. So I always equated what was going on with me, every karma that I experienced. Oh my God, that was it. That was it. So I had to learn how to forgive myself. And that to me was the change that started coming about, and this was really, even like I said, after I had Naila, because just to share that quick story, I was in an abusive situation with her father when I got pregnant, you know what I'm saying? And I got pregnant, and this was during the time that I needed to get out of that abusive situation. And that was challenging because he wasn't trying to hear that. He wasn't trying to hear, you're not getting ready to do anything to my child at all, So that was a very challenging experience for me. And I went through so much emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. First of all, getting out of the situation. And now I'm pregnant with this man's baby. I don't want this, and that was my mindset. I don't want it, but, I appreciate, the fact that you guys are talking about support. This is so ironic, you all. So you said something about your aunts, because this time one of my aunts did step in, I was pregnant. This was the time, this was after the second abortion. This was when I moved to Charlotte. I started, I had already, excuse me, not before I moved to Charlotte. This was before I moved to Charlotte, but this was after my second abortion with the guy that I was in a previous relationship before the abusive one. And she found out that I was pregnant. My mother was very disappointed, gave me that look. And we talk about this to this day. We laugh about it now, but I was so hurt. And she said, and then you're pregnant by this demon seed, So it was so much of that. And that's why, hence, I didn't tell her about the previous pregnancies. Yeah. Because I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to, be the ridicule of the family, at that moment. So with carrying Naila, I pondered. I made the appointment. And my aunt called me the day of my appointment. She said, don't do that. She said, don't do that. She said, you probably would never be able to have kids again if you make this decision. And that's what opened up to her about my previous abortions. That was my first time talking to my aunt about that, And she shared with me, she said, I too was in an abusive situation. And your cousin, she's what? She's perfectly fine. I said, but auntie, he's going to be in my life. He's going to be, it's going to be a lot. That's all I thought about, all the possibilities of what it was going to look like by bringing who is now Miss Naila Serenity into this world. You know what I'm saying? And none of that happened. None of that happened. Of course, I had to get away from the relationship. That was and I was literally, she was just starting, to gestate really well. I was like maybe 3 weeks pregnant with her at the time. I just found out, and I literally got away from that relationship. And when my aunt called me and made that, just basically had me think about what I was doing. I have that in my book as well, The Power of Three. She was my angel in that moment, So I really, after I've had Naila, I had to start dealing with all of the other, potential children that I could have brought into the world, and how to forgive myself. I had to start doing some inner child work. I had to start speaking to that 19-year-old. I had to start speaking to that 21-year-old so I could heal, to be able to fully raise her. It's been said that Naila probably was the same baby that came, that was trying to come through. It probably was, I don't know. But I had to really, I think that the change for me was definitely forgiveness. Forgiveness is a process, and there's even still sometimes I have to go back and revisit that, to just forgive myself, to just keep moving, because that was the decision. I don't regret it. I was not mentally, emotionally ready for children at all. You know, I don't know what my life would have looked like, you know, at that time. I just was not ready. So I know I don't regret, you know, making, doing, I know I probably went on to. Sorry,
Oh,
you
no,
guys.
no, you're fine. It was good. Tameka, did you want to add anything?
So it wasn't until I held on to regret, and remember I said it sat dormant until the retreat, and I will share how because I had the regret, but then after the retreat, and somebody called me that was at the retreat, so I'll share a little bit. We had an exercise where we had to write our bad things that we had done in life or were dealing with on sticky notes and put them all over our body and walk around the room and see if who could relate, or, you know, and take their sticky or their trauma from them. And I totally forgot about the abortions. So I went to someone who had on their sticky multiple abortions. And I took it because I realized, yeah, I've had that. And when I was about to pass them to go to the next person, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I just could not stop crying. And she was very compassionate. And I said, I totally forgot about it. Like, I was shaken up, like I couldn't pull it together. So if y'all were there, so if you happen to remember how broken up I was, you know, I left the room and had to be brought back in, and I wouldn't tell anybody what was wrong. She knew, but I wouldn't tell anybody what was wrong because I felt embarrassed and ashamed and guilty. And when we got back here, when I got back home, she called me and she said, I have a message for you. Now, I won't share the entire message, but she did. So, Tonise, when you said Naila probably came back, she did tell me. She said 2 of them came back. And then she gave me a message to get through with the others. And it just set me free. And it was like, because Ayisha had shared with you yesterday, it's not something I want to share to the whole world on this live. But it wasn't then until I got free, like shackles were released. I didn't realize I was holding on to all of that pain for all those many years. And like I said, it was well over 30 something years that I just sat there and I thought I was okay. And God realized that I wasn't. And I remember him saying to me, because people who know me know that I have a divine connection. I may not use it all the time, but I know his voice. And he said to me, he said, I forgave you before the act was even
Okay. That's another too.
that helped me so much.
Wow.
And then there have been times when I wanted to help other women, but I could not, because they weren't a safe place. I could only be there and be compassionate in the midst of their trauma, because I saw the character of them, you know, that when they got through their stuff, they would go and talk and gossip about it. So I dare not share it. You know, I was put to shame because with my daughter's father, we were going to get married. Oh God, I'm so glad I did not marry him. But we were doing premarital counseling, and rather than me share my own truth, he shared it. And the therapist was a holy roller. So, and he put me to, he was shaming me, you know, and I asked him, the guy that I was dating, I said, why would you do that? And he said, because I felt like you needed to get it out. And I still struggle with that. Like, you told something that I didn't want to be shared. So now with my now husband, I had shared it with him, not because I felt like he was going to be ashamed, but because I knew that was a place that I could be free. And he said, wow, you've really been through a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and I was grateful because he said he's very empathic, but he can hide it and act like he's a Taurus. So he can hide it and act like he don't give 2 craps. But to see him feel so compassionate towards what I had done and what I had experienced, so that helped me to heal and get free. So I'm proud of me for being able to get on here and talk about it, because I know that it was God ordained, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when I look back at it, I feel like, and of course I'm always piggybacking off of everyone, when I think about like how I felt then versus how I felt now, I was dealing with it. I think I was kind of dealing with it then because I could remember, so freshman year, junior year, I was really, really into writing poetry. And I used to do spoken word and all that. And so oftentimes when I was writing poetry, it was usually about love or pain. And so that was a painful moment for me. And so that did come up for me in poetry. So I remember sharing it then, but then I would also have dreams. I could see a baby in my dreams. And so sometimes I thought the baby was mine. And then sometimes I wasn't sure, but I kept having recurring dreams of the baby. And I remember actually voicing it to my guy at the time. We were still together, and he had the same dreams. And the baby was the same sex. And so it was a couple of years later that even he said, like, gosh, maybe we shouldn't have did it. You know, like maybe we should have like went through and we actually had a conversation because we hadn't talked about it, you know, before that. Like we knew we did it, but we didn't have any conversations about like, I'm hurting, you know, I don't know. But I learned then also that he was hurting too about the decision. Because there was, you know, real love there between us. And then I found myself too, like when I knew the child was supposed to be born, it would be every couple of years, this child was going to be this age. If I had this child would be this child. This child would be this age now. If I had, you know, if I had the child. And so I think it changed from me feeling lost and then guilt and shame to now I feel delivered because I'm giving voice to it. You know what I'm saying? I'm feeling a sense of freedom because I'm giving voice to it. Because again, too, three of you have actually given birth. I haven't given birth, and I highly desire to give birth. And so my guilt was like pinhole there for years. Like, you might have given up your only chance. Did you? You know what I'm saying? Well, you messed up your blessing. I would hear that voice, but my God voice wasn't saying that. That was my negative voice. That was my negative self-talk talking to me. God wasn't saying that to me. You know, I was hearing something completely different on that side. So, I just, like I said, the conversation came up because I was like, I refuse to be trapped by this. I refuse for other women to feel trapped and imprisoned and continue to be in silence about something that happens to 1 in every 3 women, you know, no matter what facet, you know, of life. They try to often pinhole it to people in low economic areas. They try to pin it to women of color. This is across the spectrum. And this is across age spectrum.
No matter that or anything. Culture.
Yes. Yes, this is across it all. So religion, whatever, it is literally across everyone. And I try not to make generalizations, but hey, as a researcher, the research says it. And the research says it here and in British and the Caribbean islands and in South America. I mean, it says it everywhere that I have looked up. So, and you know, of course, my mode is always freedom, to free people through healing. So has my thought process changed? Absolutely. It has. Not to say hurt doesn't come in sometimes. It still comes up. But I think that's a natural part of it. You know. So the next question is, were you aware of other family members who had experienced this?
Okay. So I've learned that my mom has had abortions, but then she had an ectopic pregnancy that almost killed her. And I often wonder if it's because of the abortions. Okay. So I'll share just my mom, when she had me, she was 17 going on 18. Okay. And when she found out that she was pregnant, abortions were illegal. And thank God for my grandmother. Ooh, she passed away when I was 13. But she had her $50 to go up the street to get an abortion with the woman who was doing them with hangers. And my grandmother did not allow her to. So I found out that she had a couple of abortions. And, you know, I don't know where they were. Me and my brother are 13 months apart. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it had to have been after, you know, we were born. And I understood, but she didn't talk about it. And that was one of the things that when I found out that you didn't even talk, like she doesn't even know that I know. I happened to find out by putting some things together. Let me see. Okay. And I didn't, you know, I could understand and relate. You had 2 kids. You didn't want me. You made that very clear. It wasn't that she didn't want Tameka. She didn't want me, a child, because of previous trauma. Okay. So, when I found out, I was like, wow. And now that I am healed and looking back on when she was dealing with what she was dealing with, there was no real support. You know, we were, as Black people, just surviving. We were not thriving. So she couldn't give me, like Andre said, you don't know what you don't know. You didn't have the mental capacity to give me what I needed. You were just angry. You know? So learning that, it bothered me until I got to a place to understand and process why she didn't give it to me. You know, as far as my aunts, my grandparents, I was always too afraid. My father's mother had 8 children. And I often wanted to ask, did you miscarry? Did you abort? You know, okay, so I don't like to freak people out but we, at being spiritual people, there are certain things that God will show you. So I know that certain aunts have had them, you know, but I don't talk about it because, you know, I don't want them to be ashamed. But I do know that when we talk about generational curses, you know, my daughters both had children out of wedlock, and I wasn't upset. But my oldest daughter was a teenager. She was 17. So when I knew immediately to protect her, not to let people talk, you know, you fast, you this, you that. And my family, I was guarded and they knew better. Don't open your mouth to her at all, or there's going to be a problem. So I remember my grandmother was like, I thought, you know, she would be the one to break this generational curse because of being in the church and how it's a sin to be pregnant and not be married according to what their standards are. So, and I had to remember, you know, hey, and it gave me a sense of freedom, but I didn't say it to her. You helped to continue this curse because you were a teen mom that was unmarried, you know. So I saw what I saw, but there was no support. So when my girls, you know, when I found out that they were pregnant, the oldest one, I was just like, well, hell, we've been through worse. We've been through a divorce. We were homeless. He left us destitute. This is easy. I got 5 of y'all, so we know how to do this, you know. But then when the other one, when I found out that she was pregnant, I was very supportive during the pregnancy. When I found out, I was just like, I was upset because I had prepared her. So, you know, if I learned, I gave them a safe place to come to if I found out that they were pregnant and they wanted to get an abortion. They've never, you know, I don't know if they did it. They never came to me. So I can't say that I'm that mother that was supportive in that area. But I have nieces, you know, that have come to me. I have younger cousins that have come to me. I wanted to be that safe place that I didn't have per se, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so just making sure that, and then to listen to you say 1 in 3, because as a minister, of course, I'm a Christian minister with Christianity is my foundation, but African spirituality and, you know, Ifa is, you know, my source in the middle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So being in the church for all of those years and watching them condemn people for telling you abortion is a sin, premarital sex is a sin, having a baby out of wedlock is a sin, and this was the place where most of the women were unwed mothers, you know, and listening to you, it's like, wow, you know. And 1 in 3, you know how many churches I've sat in? You know how many churches we have sat in where you condemning people from the pulpit and these women couldn't get free because you condemning them from the pulpit and not creating a safe place for them to talk about it?
Mm.
So that's a wake-up call. That gives me another charge to make sure that I'm a safe place for women, you know, because that tripped me out. Yeah, I know I went on a little tangent there, but I felt the need to say that because there's so many women that sit in the church. We are the church, most of us. The women are the church, because if you get good men in the church, you know, that's a lot, because by numbers, we outnumber them. So there's no support group. There's a support group if you have a miscarriage, you know, but then I've never, you know, and I've been a minister for a good while now, and I've never seen anybody talk about it in the church because it's a sin. And that's so unfair, because the guilt and the pain that we are sharing, you know, here, it's like, wow. You know, I have to make myself be a safe place for them, because as a minister, y'all know I'm free. I don't give two fine farts. I live my life the way that I want to. Premarital sex, whatever the case may be, I don't give two fine farts because there's no judgment here. And I had somebody tell me, I had a couple of ministers that are my colleagues, and they were like, you are a safe place for people. Now I understand even more.
Yeah.
Thank you for this.
Yeah. I also wanted to share too, just to interject, you definitely had a lot of good nuggets in there too. You know, prior to abortion being legal and being, you know, this medical procedure at like clinics and hospitals, it wasn't just the wire hanger. This goes back to ancient times.
Yeah.
People were using herbs, okay? We could take this back to Egypt. I mean, we could take this all the way back where there were herbs that were used for whatever the reason that the woman couldn't carry the child, that the child was removed, you know, whether it was, like I said, some type of spiritual diagnosis, whether it was prayer, whether it was, like I said, specific herbs or concoctions that were made. But this is not a new thing. This is an ancient thing too.
Wow.
So I think we could, you know, oftentimes we discovered like it's some novel thing within like the last 20, 30, 40 years. Oh, no. This is ancient news when it comes to this. And so I think that I felt like I wanted to say that too, not to say that, you know, like we want to promote this and brand it and doing all that. But this is just to say you are not isolated even from your ancient ancestors. You see what I'm saying? Who have experienced this. And so perhaps that when we feel isolated and alone, they are the ones who come and pick us up and carry us. Perhaps they're the ones who come up and pick us and hold those babies until you're ready to receive them. You know what I'm saying? So I just want us to understand, perhaps I'm about to go somewhere else with it. Let me just stop. I was about to, say something else that it's just like a myth. Sometimes I feel like sometimes the baby comes to prepare the womb too. But there's just different ways to look at this, you know. I also wanted to share too, Tameka had brought up about this generational thing. And so I know in my family, me and my mom were the same age. So my mom was 19, I was 18, and it was both by men that we loved very dearly. I had a couple aunties that came forward. Their children also had children or abortions at the same age. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so this is another reason why I feel like the conversations are so important, because if you are feeling shame or guilt or regret, this is more the reason why you need to have the conversation.
Sure.
Yeah. So that if you know what you felt in that situation, and I feel like it's a bloodline thing. And so I also feel like our ancestors are broad, and it could be an osmosis thing. You know, I haven't given birth. I do feel like I have mothered in a sense. I have godchildren. I have children that are around me, my students. So I do think that I become their ancestor too. I do become a surrogate mom. I do become an other mother or an allo mother in a sense. So I do think that because God or whatever the community has brought us together, that I am supposed to share in those instances as well. And so, again, let's open our mouths.
You know, let me piggyback real quick, because you said something that was so profound about being this safe space. But I didn't know, let me say it this way. It's so many places that are unsafe. So if you have had an abortion or you're thinking about getting it, pray the prayer that God sends the right people that you can confide in. Because I didn't have people that I could trust, you know, that I couldn't confide in. And that's so important. And I didn't even know how to muster up the words to say, God, give me a place where I can go to that create a space for me where I'm not judged, where I'm not going to be talked about, where I'm not going to be gossiped about. You know, that's important when you were talking about, you know, that's the thing. I didn't have that. I didn't have the verbiage to even ask God for those things, you know, as we evolve. Because remember, back in the day, we didn't hear words. If we heard the words toxic, it was because of some type of poison that was underneath the sink in the kitchen or underneath the sink in the bathroom. We didn't have these type of words back then. So, you know, we didn't have the verbiage. So that's what I'm saying. If you are struggling with the guilt and the shame, or you need a safe place to talk to because you're going to get one, you know, ask God to create a safe place, because everybody doesn't have that.
And I'll piggyback on that. We have two more questions, y'all, because we going in. I have, if I would add on to that prayer, if for your child or for your loved ones, if my child cannot come to me, God, please send them to a safe space, a safe, healthy space. You know, I would probably add that. I would probably add that one on there.
I remember I had a friend. She was from Ethiopia, and in her country, where she was from in Ethiopia, it was definitely a sin to be pregnant and unmarried. And this young lady that she knew, she told me the story, and she was devastated. This girl was pregnant, and she didn't have a safe place, and it was shunned. You know, I don't know what the repercussions would be if they had found out. She took rat poison and killed herself.
Oh, wow.
So this is why I say we have to create, like, she was devastated.
Create safe spaces, make sure the conversation is clear.
Yep.
All right. So the next question is, do you think that, and I was going to go straight to the last one, but I do think this one is important. Do you think that abortion and how we process it, do you think it has we've already said it, but I just want us to point it out explicitly in different ways. Do you think it has an impact on us mentally, physically, and spiritually? And if so, how? So Tonise or Andrea?
I'll go first. I'll give you the floor first. Andrea?
Oh, who, me? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was saying.
I thought you were about to go. So, yes. Mentally, physically, and emotionally, it has an impact on you, right? Like, we've already touched on some of the mental stuff, just your emotions and how you feel, the lack of support, feeling ashamed, feeling disgusted, right? And then you have the physical part. Oh my gosh, am I going to damage my body from having an abortion? Am I going to be able to get pregnant again? You know, I don't want to be touched because I'm afraid of getting pregnant. Like, but do I want to take birth control pills all the time? Well, that later down the line, will we hear something about birth control coming out, right? And spiritually, absolutely. There, like you said, Ayisha, you would have dreams. I had dreams after the fact for a while, and you know, different things have transpired, you know, but I used to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a bad person because I've just literally killed a child at the time, you know. In my mind, these are thoughts, you know, am I going to be karma? Will that come back to me? But, you know, I have two beautiful children now, right? You know, and so throughout time and getting healing and getting the help that you need. But again, you don't know what you know till you know. I never knew until I started my spiritual journey that it had sat with me for so long, and it had affected who I am and how I feel, and you know, just by feeling heard because of, you know, what I went through mentally with, you know, my mom really not saying much as a mother, and we didn't talk about it. That affected me down the line of being able to use my voice, being able to speak up. But I never connected those pieces until it was just this year, I'm going to be honest. And throughout my spiritual journey, it was uncovered this year why I am the way I am. And I took a breathwork class where in breathwork classes, you go back into a moment in time where your trauma started. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. But that moment in time took me back to my 16-year-old child when I was in the car, when my parents found me, and all my emotions came out and came through. And a lot of it was, like Miss Tonise saying, forgiveness, right? I had forgiven myself, but I had not forgiven feeling like my mother was there. Because there's a difference between your emotions and feeling it versus a being there, right? And I have to keep saying this because it's not something that we've actually talked about, right? She's a great mother. She was very supportive, but again, it's still my experience and the emotions tied to it, right? So, sorry I said a mouthful, but yes, it is all that is affected in your life, period. And until it comes up, but I am grateful for my journey that it's come up and that I've addressed it because it has now freed me, should I say, more so, you know. And it's huge.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Andrea, and everything that you all are saying. Because first of all, when you are healing, you know, it is a lot of layers of exposure that happens when you're healing. Say you want to experience more of God, be ready to go through a process of healing yourself. And that's very important. And Ayisha, even you touched on ancestral. There's so much trauma before we even got here that we're still dealing with in this physical form that we're carrying, you know. So based on our decisions that we've made, you know, we talked about promiscuity, we didn't know the guy, I was stupid, I was this, that, and the other. All of this is encompassed in everything that we have done throughout our lives. Ancestral, you know, trauma, you know, the trauma from parental guidance, you know, everything, even that everybody is affected is what I'm saying. So just like you said, Andrea, we only know, and we move in however we move. based on our environment and what our experiences are. And once you start going through a spiritual journey or your healing process, a lot of those things are uncovered, especially if you're really healing, you know, because I know we can go and we can talk to a counselor, we can do that, but you literally have to do the work on yourself to your worth, understand what you have created and what you've done in the past, that you not only let it go, but you have to forgive yourself, you know, and now you have to use all of those things that you experienced in your life to now, what you said, Tameka, is to create a safe place for others to have a place where they can come and have somebody to hold their hands through the process. We're pioneering this. We didn't have anybody to really hold our hands like that, you know, until later. You said you had your family, all of that. Even for people, even for us to point out that there's somebody there to help you go through these challenges that you're going through. That's why I am a big advocate of women ministry and women's groups and circles. You know, that's why those are the things that I've created, because I wanted people to have a safe place, because I didn't feel like I had a safe place. My mom was there. Her and my dad was divorced, but I didn't feel comfortable talking to my mother about it based on her religious beliefs and what she felt at the time. It's so crazy and ironic. Now, me and my mother have the best relationship, you know. She regrets saying demon seed because, of course, Naila is like, that's her baby. You know, it's amazing how, you know, now I can talk to my mother about these particular things. I never knew anybody in my family having any abortions, but I have a lot of women who've lost children in my family talk about those things openly. So even in my family, we now have healing circles together. We'll just get together, cook some food, and these conversations start happening. And to me, that's my ancestors saying it's time. It's break these curses. It's time to heal. It's time. I love it when my aunts talk about something that experienced in their life and they break down crying. I say, Auntie, we're not judging you. You're healing, you know, and I'm full talking about it because this is something that is needed in everybody's family. You feel what I'm saying? You don't have that family, you can have a safe place to do these, so that way we can do it. So healing takes a lot. And I do think it affects us, just to get back to the question. I know I went on a tangent, but it definitely affects us. It definitely affects us emotionally and spiritually. But there's reasons why. We have to sift through what those reasons why were, then get to the root cause of it. Then we can start really tearing down those layers and start healing and breaking generational curses. And breaking those patterns of thought processes that we had, and, you know, breaking that certain mentality, you know, mentality that you're bad because you did this, that, and the other. That's a consciousness that is creating a lot of our community that we're breaking. So to this whole topic today, Ayisha, was amazing, because we're pioneering something. We're really moving through our ancestors at this moment. This is a call to us to help us heal from this process as well, because a lot of them are still suffering in silence. Like I said, my second one, he regretted we did this. You know, I don't processing that now. He's on married. He has other, you know what I'm saying? But I don't know how that has affected his life. You know, that I did that. So it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had, and then it definitely affects us in every aspect of our being. And it's something that needs to be talked about. I hope I answered the question.
You did.
Okay.
I wanted to add to that, and this is just kind of piggybacking again. We're going that ancestral part. I will say this time and time again when it comes to these messages of healing. When we know better, we must do better. And so it is. If it's come to you for a reason, these downloads, which that's what I consider them to be. When God gives you these downloads, your ancestors, your guides, when they give you these downloads, you have a responsibility to do something with it. It's probably because, well, I'm not even going to say probably, they trust you. They even trust you with the experience, too. They even trust you with the experience to do something with it. And so when we don't do anything with it, it's extremely irresponsible. I think it's extremely selfish not to do something about it. When you know better, it's extremely selfish not to open your mouth. It's extremely selfish not to touch somebody if you know you got a healing hand. It's extremely selfish not to Pray for somebody if you know that's a gift that you have. Whatever that lane is, I think is extremely selfish, because you're going to keep making your family go in circles. Your family could be evolving, but you may be the one making them, you may be the cause of them running after their tail. You know what I'm saying? And so it's got to stop somewhere. And that, I know sometimes I say, and I'm sure you guys say it, like, why it gotta be me? Why I gotta be the one, breaking generational curses and doing all this kind of stuff? Because
all the time.
They trust you. They trust you, and God, we got to consider it an honor that we can hold the mantle, until it's time for us to go to pass it on. And then hopefully we're given the tools and the jewel to somebody else that needs to continue it, if it doesn't stop with you. But it is so important. It makes me so mad when I talk to other family members sometime and I'm like, have you ever experienced blah, blah, blah? And they're like, yeah, but I didn't. And I'm like, and you didn't say nothing?
Yeah.
Why didn't you say anything?
They didn't have the tools.
Right. Yeah.
They didn't have the
tools. So, and I've had some who said, I've never been asked. Wow. I never thought about it like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so, yes, we do. We have a huge responsibility to move on it now. If not, then we are.
It's a disservice,
It is.
Like
it's in vain. Yeah. It's all in vain.
Many are called, but few are chosen. About that particular line or scripture, when many are chosen. Yeah. The ones that are chosen is the ones who heard the call. Oof. Because it could have been several generations before us that knew this stuff, understood it, but they was not ready to deal with it. They didn't have the tools to process it. They didn't understand how to create a safe space. And in that I had to, have some forgiveness. We talked about, maybe forgiving our parents and stuff. Yeah. And their humanness, understand their situation, understanding the time that they went through, understand the mentality that they was under, the bondage that they was under. So many are called, few are chosen, but the ones that are chosen are the ones who heard the call, and we hear the call. Yeah. Why we get on this live and just tell all our business about. I know. Just tell what we be the poster child for it. I did want to add something else too. When we talk about how it affected us, I'm gonna say ditto to everything that was already said. But and I'll just speak on a certain experience. I definitely felt like, for me, it impacted the way that I engaged when it came to like serious or emotional relationships. So I keep saying that me and this person was in love. So anytime I felt like love, if I was in love or I felt a sense of love coming, I was almost least likely to be free with that person. I was more free when the attachment wasn't necessarily there. Your girl could do tricks. You know what I'm saying? I could. There was a sense of freedom, but then if the feelings were there, then I backed up. And I think a part of that was a reminder, I don't want this to happen. I don't know what that is, but I know what that is. It feels familiar, and that familiarity feels like pain. That familiarity feels like trauma. So that's sometimes where self-sabotaging comes in relationships that could be healthy, that could be good, that could be nurturing. I don't want a chance feeling that pain again. And it could be because of situations like this. So I hate to say it, sometimes people who didn't deserve the best of me got the best of me. And people who actually did deserve more of me got the worst of me, because I feared that pain so much. Wow. And that could be attributed to abortion and other things, but it just seemed like the closer I got to love, the more I was like, let me
let me go ahead and let me back this thing up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want to re-experience trauma instead of healing from it. You know what I'm saying?
The vulnerability series.
Huh?
Hence now you have the vulnerability
Yes.
series.
Yes. Hence now I was forced to have the vulnerability series. So let's say that.
But
Praise
Ayisha,
God for the vulnerability series.
you said something very important. You hit the nail on the head when you talked about your relationships, good and bad. And as I'm thinking, because I also felt lost, and so I was searching for what I lost in the wrong